At 23:18 hours on July 9, 1943, Captain Henry Collins felt his C-47 buck sideways, as if someone had kicked the port wing with a giant invisible boot, and the night outside his cockpit turned white. He didn't see the tracer round that did it. He heard it, that ugly final thunk in the engine cowling, and then the number one engine stopped being a machine and became an ongoing explosion. Aluminum peeled back, cylinders tore loose, fuel mist turned to a wall of fire rolling backward along the wing toward 28 men packed shoulder to shoulder in the dark fuselage, all hooked to a single cable that now ran parallel to a blowtorch. The manual phrases that had seemed calm in training, feather the prop, secure fuel, maintain heading, meant something different at 700 feet over black water with burning metal a few feet from his left hand. Collins had 42 seconds, maybe less, before the heat reached the main tank, the spar failed, or the fire ate the lift right out of his wing. In those 42 seconds, every option was a kind of murder. Keep the aircraft level and on time, and he gave the paratroopers their planned drop, straight through a curtain of burning fuel. Bank away from the fire, and he threw half the stick into a jump profile their parachutes weren't rigged for. Turn back toward the sea, and he might put a burning C-47 into the water with 31 men still inside. This is the story of a pilot who realized there was no way to save everyone, and then chose who would have a chance to die on their feet.
Captain Henry Brick Collins had flown cargo before he flew men. Before Sicily, his logbook was full of milk runs, fuel to one strip, ammunition to another, evac flights back. He respected the C-47 as a forgiving workhorse, a twin-engine truck with wings. It would fly with half its cylinders gone, shrug off abuse, land on strips that barely deserved the name. That reputation was why the planners trusted it with airborne operations. If anything could drag 28 heavily loaded paratroopers to a drop zone in bad weather and worse flak, it was a Dakota. The briefing at Kairouan had been like every other airborne briefing, except for the map. Sicily looked small and close until they started drawing lines over water. The drop zones were inland, behind coastal guns. Approach route, low over the sea, then a climb over cliffs and olive groves. Wind, moderate. Flak, possible. Collins didn't believe either word. Weather over the Mediterranean in summer could build crosswinds out of nowhere, and by July 1943, any German worth his salt knew Allied transports meant paratroopers, which meant flak gunners didn't sleep much. His load that night? 28 men from 2nd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Double stick, both sides of the fuselage, knees interlocked, static lines clipped to the overhead cables, reserve chutes sitting like extra lungs on their chests. The jump master, Lieutenant Riley, moved down the line checking harnesses, slapping shoulders, making jokes that weren't funny but did their job. Collins watched them come aboard from the cockpit, silhouettes against the floodlights. To him, they were extra weight and extra responsibility. Troops turned a C-47 from an aircraft into a promise. Takeoff was at 22:43 hours. The night air over Tunisia was hot, thick, carrying sand. As they climbed, the cabin cooled, breath turned visible, and the hum of 2 Pratt & Whitney engines settled into the background. Navigation lights were off. Only the faint glow of instruments lit the cockpit. In the back, 28 men rocked with the motion of the plane, listening to the rhythmic creak of harness webbing and the occasional cough, each imagining his own version of the coming jump. At 23:09, they hit the first crosswind. The C-47 shuddered, drifted left. Collins corrected, noting how aggressively the wind was pushing them toward the coast early. Stronger than forecast, his navigator muttered, pencils scraping. Over the intercom, Miller, his crew chief, called forward. Doors good, lines are good. Men are quiet, for now. The first flak burst appeared 5 minutes later, a dull orange flower far off their right wing. Collins watched it, counting. 1, 2, 3 more closer. The pattern wasn't for them yet. Gunners were ranging for the mainstream of transports, but they were in the envelope now, in the realm where random steel and poor aim could ruin a man's night. Collins kept them at 700 feet, lower than ideal, but low enough to make the silhouette small and their time over land short. The plan said they'd reach the initial point in 4 minutes. Then the tracer found them. It didn't feel like a single hit. It felt like a sequence collapsing. First came the metallic slap, like a hammer blow on the far side of the firewall. Then a judder through the airframe as the port engine's rhythm went from smooth to savage. For half a second, Collins thought mag failure, something mechanical, survivable. Then fire punched out of the cowling seams in a flat sheet and instantly wrapped the leading edge of the wing. Number 1 didn't just quit, it exploded outward. A cylinder head, glowing, tore free and vanished into the night. Shrapnel chewed a ragged hole in the upper wing skin. In the cabin, men flinched as a bar of white-orange light raced down the port-side windows, turning every rivet into a glinting eye. The smell of hot oil, burning rubber, and raw fuel flooded the cockpit. Training kicked Collins' hands into motion. Throttle back on number 1. Mixture to idle cutoff. Hit the firewall shutoff. Feather the prop to stop drag. Except the feathering motor whined once and died. The propeller on the dead engine windmilled, now a massive dragging disc out on a wing that was also on fire. The C-47 slewed left hard, nose yawing toward the burning engine. Collins stomped right rudder, fighting to keep the nose pointed vaguely along the intended track. "Fire port wing!" Miller's voice ripped over the intercom, louder than any drill he'd ever run. "Fire is on the skin, not just the engine, flames running back." At 700 feet, there was no margin for, let's see what happens. Fire on the wing meant fuel line risk, meant sparks near tanks, meant the critical fear every multi-engined pilot carried quiet in his bones. A structural burn-through at the spar. If the wing route failed, it wasn't Mayday. It was a sudden roll inverted and a vertical line into the ground. In the cabin, the port-side stick of paratroopers watched the world outside their windows turn from black to a flickering orange. Heat pressed against the skin of the fuselage. The closest men could feel it through their sleeves. Riley, standing near the door, saw the reflection before he saw the flame itself, a hellish smear on the metal opposite. He didn't need the intercom to know what had happened. He'd seen training films of burning transports. He also knew the doctrine. Jump on green, no matter what. But doctrine didn't draw neat diagrams of a jump door potentially becoming a vertical curtain of fire. If the fuel streaming off the wing found the slipstream just right and wrapped around the fuselage, the first man through that door might step straight into a falling wall of burning vapor. At 700 feet, there was no altitude to fall through the flame and hope the parachute survived. In the cockpit, Collins's eyes flicked between instruments and the bright smear on his left. Altitude, 680 feet and sagging. Airspeed, down 10 knots from the drag. Rate of descent, increasing. Time to the point where they were supposed to drop, maybe a minute. Time until wing failure or tank ignition? Unknown. Somewhere between soon and already too late. "Brick, we can't hold this for long. She's heavy and she's dirty." Collins knew it. Full fuel in the mains, 28 men, equipment, and a dead engine still spinning to climb, he'd need power from the good engine, but push it too hard, and he risked overstressing or overheating the only thing keeping them aloft. To keep level, he had to accept flying slowly with asymmetrical thrust and a growing fire. To turn sharply invited structural loads the wing might not handle in its damaged state. The manual in his head droned. Feather dead engine, shut off fuel, maintain heading, call for fire bottles if installed. But the manual didn't mention what to do when your dead engine was also a flamethrower inches from a door you were supposed to push 28 men out of. Riley slammed a hand against the cabin light panel, bathing the interior in red. Men on the port side flinched away from the glowing windows. On the starboard side, faces turned to watch them, trying to read how bad it was from expressions alone. No one wanted to ask the question out loud. Are we all dead and just don't know it yet? "Eyes on me!" Riley shouted. The plane's vibration turned his voice into a rough buzz. "We may not drop on the mark. We may not drop at all. You do not move until I say so. Understood?" A wave of nods, some slow, some too fast. The man nearest the door, PFC Harris, had a view of the fire. He couldn't look away. His knuckles were white around the doorframe. He could feel the heat on the side of his face, like someone had opened an oven next to him. In the cockpit, Collins and his co-pilot wrestled with the asymmetry. The C-47 wanted to roll toward the dead engine, the way a man will lean toward his injury. Collins countered with opposite rudder and a touch of aileron, trying to keep the wings level enough. The fire along the wing had grown into tongues licking backward, seeking seams and gaps. Under the outer panel, fuel sloshed in tanks designed for range, not combat. "Miller, how far back is it?" Collins called. "It's past the engine, moving toward the fuel cap. Skin's blistering, we've got droplets coming off in the slipstream. If that hits the door—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. A thought hit Collins. If he banked hard right, away from the burning wing, he might use centrifugal force and airflow to carry flame outward and up, away from the fuselage. But at this altitude and weight, a hard bank risked dropping their inside wing, losing lift and stalling. A stall at 600 feet with one engine in fire was not a recoverable event. Alternatively, he could drop his port wing slightly, letting the fire sweep below the fuselage instead of over it. That could clear the door, but it would also expose the lower surface of the wing to directly impinging flame. Skin fails faster when heat licks upward against trapped air. Every choice paid in different coin. Move the fire, risk the structure. Keep the structure, risk the door. Favor the men inside now, risk the mission and whoever waited on the ground for those paratroopers to take out guns. "Navigator," Collins said, forcing his voice steady. "How far to the DZ if we stay on this heading?" 2 minutes, maybe less. But Brick, if we go another 30 seconds before we turn, we're committed. No way back to the sea if that wing gives." There it was. 120 seconds to get men out where they should be. 42 seconds, his guts number now, before the wing stopped being a wing. Those times didn't line up. Collins made a decision the manual never considered. "We're not making the briefed DZ," he said. "We're making any land I can put under them before we become a lantern." He nudged the yoke right, just enough to start a shallow bank away from the burning engine, not enough to pull G-forces that would tear stressed metal. At the same time, he fed power carefully into number 2, feeling the whole airframe strain. The nose came up a hair, altitude loss slowed, then stabilized. The fire's angle shifted, climbing above the wing instead of streaming directly along it, for now. "Door, this is cockpit," Collins said. "Listen carefully. In about 20 seconds, I'm going to give you the best patch of darkness I can find. It will not be where you trained for. You get them out fast, clean, no hesitation. Understand?" Riley answered after one heartbeat. "Copy. We'll take ground over fire." He turned to the men. "New plan. We're not hitting the target we love, we're hitting the ground we get. That doesn't change what you are. When your boots hit whatever God throws under you, you move, you gather, you find trouble, and you ruin it. You don't sit there whining about the map." Harris swallowed. "Sir, the fire." Riley cut him off. "You jump through what you have to jump through. It's either that or we all ride this thing down together." Back in the cockpit, something changed in the way the flame moved. Collins saw a tongue of fire reach for the fuselage, then pull back. Airflow was redirecting it over the top of the wing, away from the door. It wasn't safety, it was a little more time. Beneath them, Sicily rolled closer. Not the carefully chosen patchwork of fields from the sand table, but a mess of olive groves, stone walls, and dark blotches that might be orchards or ravines. No pathfinders, no flares, no guarantee of altitude above obstacles. Just land in the abstract. "Green in 10, Collins called, not bothering with lights. The panel in the fuselage would stay red, only his word mattered now. 9. 8. As he counted down, he imagined the math as clearly as the instruments. If he delayed the jump to search for flatter ground, he increased the chance the wing would fail mid-run. If he rushed the jump now, some would land in trees, rocks, maybe water, but they'd be outside a burning aircraft instead of inside it. 3, 2, 1, go. Riley didn't hesitate. He slapped the nearest man and shoved. "Move! Move! Move!" The first paratrooper stepped into a blast of hot air and relative quiet, the odd, inverted silence of open sky, and then vanished. Static line snapped taut. Shooter's knot of muscle and gear pulled away. Portside men flinched as they passed the burning wing, but the stream of fire ran above, not into their chutes. The light flicker painted their faces in orange slices as they dropped. On the starboard side, men had a better view of the ground. Only hints of structure, more than enough to be terrifying at that altitude. From the cockpit, Collins felt each departure as a feather-light change in weight and trim. The C-47 grew marginally more responsive. The dead weight of 28 men turned into a shifting center of gravity of an empty shell. With every shout from the back, with every "man out," his mental clock adjusted. 30 left, 22, 15. Miller kept count aloud, voice hoarse. Last 5, last 3, 2. The last man out hesitated half a heartbeat, staring at the burning wingtip. Miller didn't give him time to complete the thought. One hard shove between the shoulder blades, and he was gone. "Stick is clear," Miller shouted. "Door secure." Collins didn't answer. He was already turning harder now, away from land, away from any chance of raining flaming wreckage into the drop pattern behind them.
With the men gone, Collins owed physics an answer to a different question. Could he get a 1.5-engine, partially cooked C-47 back to friendly territory? Or was his job now to ditch it in a way that didn't light the Mediterranean on fire? "Brick, I can't hold this rudder forever," his co-pilot grunted. Sweat ran down his neck in streaks, despite the chill blowing through the cockpit. "You won't have to," Collins said. "If the wing's going, it'll go soon. If it doesn't, we nurse her as far as she lets us." Behind them, 28 canopies were blooming in broken sequence over a part of Sicily no planner had circled. Some men hit olive trees hard enough to break ribs. Some dropped into stone-walled terraces. A few, landing in open fields in 1s and 2s instead of in neat sticks, found themselves closer to German positions than intended. More than one German officer that night believed the Allies had planned a deliberate scatter to confuse their response. They hadn't. Collins had just picked the only kind of chaos that left anyone alive to cause problems. Raven 7 didn't explode. Not immediately. The fire did what metal and fuel and air currents allowed. It ate skin and ribs, blackened paint, warped panels. The left wingtip drooped, charred, but the main spar held long enough for Collins to nurse the crippled aircraft back toward the sea. At 8 miles off the coast, with the shoreline a dark smudge behind and the fire still refusing to die, Collins made another decision no manual had prepared him for. He pointed the nose into the wind, trimmed for best glide on the remaining power, and aimed low. "We're putting her in," he said. "I'm not dragging this bonfire over our own ships." They ditched hard. The impact slammed teeth into tongues, tore instruments from mounts. Cold black water rushed in through every torn seam. Collins, his co-pilot, and Miller fought their way out through a cockpit window as the C-47 rolled on its side, burning wing finally losing its argument with buoyancy. They clung to floating debris until a Navy boat, cursing the fire on the horizon that had given them a heading, hauled them aboard. Days later, after Sicily's dust replaced seawater in the creases of his skin, Collins sat in a tent with an intelligence officer who wanted to know why his stick had landed off-plan, why reports from scattered paratroopers described a burning transport veering away from the DZ, why some men had died in badly chosen landing spots rather than in the corridor carefully prepared for them. Because, in 42 seconds, I had to choose between giving them the perfect jump through a wall of fire or a bad jump through clean air. I chose the bad jump. The officer looked down at casualty figures. Fewer dead than his initial estimates predicted. Objectives near their intended zones had been taken, albeit messily, by men who had crawled out of culverts and orchards instead of assembly points. "Do you think you made the right call?" he asked. Collins thought about Harris, about the men who wouldn't come home, about the ones who would talk for decades about landing in the wrong place under the right sky. Ask me again in 40 years. If any of them are still around to tell you what they did with the extra time I bought them, I'll let their lives be my answer. That's the kind of story that makes viewers lean forward and ask themselves the only question that matters. If you had 42 seconds and everyone on board, would you choose the clean drop that kills them now, or the dirty one that lets some of them figure out the rest on the ground?